Every August, the sky over parts of Southeast Asia turns orange. In Palembang, South Sumatra, families gather outdoors this week. Not to protest, not to evacuate, but to pray. To pray for rain, because rain is the only thing that has ever reliably stopped what is happening beneath their feet. Across the country, satellites are recording something unprecedented. As of mid-August 2026, monitoring platforms have logged more than 150,000 fire hotspots across Indonesia, a number that has already surpassed the devastating fire seasons of 2019 and 2023, and it happened before the fire season even reached its peak. Schools have gone dark in West Kalimantan. Not closed for a holiday, closed because the air outside is unsafe to breathe, and children are being taught through a screen instead of a classroom. This is not a natural disaster. This is a machine, and it has been running on schedule for almost 30 years. To understand 2026, you have to go back to 1997. That year, Indonesia experienced what was, at the time, one of the worst environmental catastrophes in modern Southeast Asian history. Haze blanketed Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia itself for weeks. Flights were grounded. Hospitals filled with respiratory cases. And when investigators went looking for a cause, Indonesia's own Ministry of Forestry admitted something remarkable. The overwhelming majority of those fires had not started by accident. They had been lit, deliberately, by palm oil and timber companies clearing land for plantations. That was 1997. It happened again in 2015, again in 2019, and now, in 2026, it is happening again, at a scale that is breaking records. The question isn't why Indonesia has forest fires. Dry seasons happen everywhere. The real question is why, after 3 decades, after international summits, after treaties, after arrests, after promises, the same fires keep coming back, worse each time. The answer starts with geology, and it ends with money. Indonesia sits on some of the largest tropical peatland reserves on Earth. Swampy, waterlogged forest floor built up over thousands of years of decomposing organic matter. In its natural state, this peat is wet, dense, and almost impossible to burn. But peat is inconvenient if you want to plant something on it. So for decades, palm oil and pulpwood companies have cut drainage canals through Indonesia's peatlands, artificially lowering the water table to dry the land out enough to plant oil palm or acacia trees. The problem is that dried peat doesn't just resist fire less. It becomes a fuel source unlike almost anything else on land. Once ignited, it doesn't burn like a forest fire. It smolders underground for weeks, sometimes surviving rain that would extinguish a normal blaze. Research has found that drainage canals alone can raise the probability of fire by more than 4 times. And here is the part that turns this from an accident into a business model. Setting a fire is, by a wide margin, the cheapest way to clear land in Indonesia. Renting heavy machinery to clear a plantation site costs real money. Lighting a match costs almost nothing. Investigations by environmental monitoring groups have repeatedly traced fire hotspots directly inside the concession boundaries of palm oil companies, not scattered randomly across the countryside, but concentrated precisely where new plantations are being prepared. This year is no exception. Indonesian police have already arrested over 70 people suspected of deliberately starting fires, and at least 4 companies are under formal investigation for allegedly using fire as a land-clearing tool. Here's where the story stops being about geology and starts being about power. Every fire season, Indonesian authorities announce arrests, dozens of names, sometimes hundreds. But look closely at who gets charged, and a pattern appears. The people led away in handcuffs are overwhelmingly smallholder farmers, people burning a few hectares to plant next season's crop, often because it's the only method they can afford. The corporations who control the concessions where the largest, most destructive fires actually originate are rarely prosecuted with the same speed or severity. Indonesian law technically allows for corporate prosecution, and companies have occasionally faced fines or civil suits. But convictions that meaningfully punish a plantation company, the kind that would change the economics of burning versus clearing, remain the exception, not the rule. Part of the reason is structural. Indonesia's economy is deeply intertwined with palm oil. It is one of the country's largest export industries, employing millions of people and generating enormous foreign revenue. A government that aggressively criminalizes the industry's largest players is in effect threatening its own economic engine. there is also an institutional gap. In 2016, following the catastrophic 2015 fire season, Indonesia created a dedicated peatland restoration agency tasked with rehabilitating drained and degraded peat. But watchdog groups report that when the agency's mandate lapsed in 2024, oversight fragmented. Responsibility for monitoring and enforcement became split and unclear at precisely the moment consistent, centralized pressure was needed most. The result: fires are no longer even confined to the dry season. Monitoring groups recorded thousands of peatland hotspots in January of this year, during the rainy season, a sign that degraded, drained peat is now flammable almost year-round, regardless of the calendar. For nearly 30 years, Indonesia's neighbors have watched this happen from across the water, and there has been remarkably little they could do about it. Singapore and Malaysia bear the brunt of the haze almost every single year. Singaporean officials have, in past crises, recorded some of the worst air pollution readings in the country's history, readings so severe they were officially classified as hazardous. In 2026, Singapore's Haze task force has once again been placed on standby, ready to activate contingency plans the moment air quality crosses a threshold. In theory, there is a regional solution. ASEAN member states signed the agreement on transboundary haze pollution specifically to address this problem, with Indonesia eventually ratifying it more than a decade after its neighbors. In theory, this agreement created a framework for information sharing, joint firefighting, and accountability. In practice, the agreement has almost no teeth. ASEAN operates on a principle of non-interference in member states' internal affairs, and Indonesia has repeatedly resisted handing over detailed concession maps that would let neighboring countries and monitoring bodies identify exactly which companies control the land where fires originate. So the cycle repeats: diplomatic complaints, ministerial meetings, statements of concern, and then, the following dry season, the fires return. Indonesia is not burning by accident. It is burning because, for 30 years, it has been more profitable to set a fire than to prevent one. And no government, no treaty, and no neighboring country has yet found a way to change that math.